Alderman Mark.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am actually going to be speaking to the motion that is on the table, which is to approve the budget. And I'm doing it today because I have a hope that our city will take another look at this budget before it comes back to us at the council meeting on Tuesday. Like it or not, we need to acknowledge that last week the voters said they want government to cut costs and not raise taxes. Our constituents are hurting, as we've talked about this evening. The many middle and low-income households of this city do not have the option of living beyond their means, and neither should the city. They have challenged us to change the way City Hall operates. I am extremely disappointed that we were presented with a deficit budget. Aldermen are given the budget and then tonight's opportunity to propose revisions to it. But it's not our job to prepare budgets. We're not in a position to know if Fred in accounting needs a new computer or not. We pay our department managers and the administration to know that, and we pay them to give us a budget that is balanced by making the tough choices and not just taking the easy way out of raising taxes and taking money out of our reserves. The proposed budget not only calls for a 2.7% increase to the tax levy, but also requires us to spend an additional $2,700,000, which will be taken out of our reserves. Now, it's been said we took $2.2 million out last year, but the reality is that's still a deficit of $3,925,518. Raising taxes and using our reserves to fill budget deficits is simply not sustainable. We have around $30 million in reserves, according to the finance director, and while that may sound like a lot of money, spending almost 10% this year is just not sustainable. That reserve is there to protect us from the risks of self-funding health insurance, and it is part of the reason we have a high bond rating, allowing us to borrow at low rates. Postponing the difficult decisions will only force us to make tougher decisions and bigger cuts later. Let's take this opportunity to change the way we do business now. Some of our increased expenses have been mandated by the state, including payments to the Wisconsin retirement system, but we still need to cut our expenses to balance the budget. When my roof leaks, and we have talked about that apparently a couple of times this evening, I'm really hoping that the roof isn't leaking when I get home, but when my roof leaks and has to be repaired, or my taxes go up, I have to cut spending in other areas. The vacation I had planned or the new refrigerator I'm going to need is going to have to be postponed. We need to do the same thing here in City Hall. We're facing a state budget deficit of $2.5 billion. And the mayor and the finance director have told us we can anticipate further cuts in the money the state returns to us. With no tobacco settlement money and no more stimulus money, we have to change the way we do business and tighten our belts, just like the people of Racine have to do. And the sooner we do it, the less painful the cuts are going to have to be in the future. Tough decisions have to be made. The price of leadership is high. I urge my fellow aldermen to reject this budget and only accept a budget from this administration that does not require a tax increase or taking money out of reserves, which we're doing now. Now, to help our administration with this effort, I have identified 4 ways we can achieve significant savings. Please recognize these are only intended as examples and as a starting point. I expect the administration to come to us with a balanced budget, not a deficit budget. Considering my fellow aldermen's recommendations along with these, I'm confident our administration can come back to us with an acceptable budget. One way is to reduce salaries, other salaries, and overtime salaries in each department except public safety departments. Using its own 2010 estimates, our finance department is going to pay a total of $856,000 in these 3 accounts. The 2010 budgeted amount for these 3 accounts in the finance department was $998,841. This means our finance department has saved us $142,841, or 14.3%, and I think they should be congratulated for it. But if they can do it, I think all other departments, with the exception of public safety, can do the same. So we should be reducing these 3 accounts by 14.3%. When I asked the Director of Finance how it was achieved, he commented that staff performed additional duties, there were open positions left unfilled, and part-time and temporary staff were used. But there were no layoffs and there were no furloughs to achieve a 14.3% decrease, requiring all departments except public safety to achieve the same results, or achieving higher results in some departments and less in others, but achieving the total overall dollar savings will result in a savings of $1,684,825. There's an attached spreadsheet to show that to you. Second item is we should reduce account 101-990-5970 contingencies to zero. All expenses should be budgeted. I know at my house, and I'll bet at everyone else's here, we don't have a contingency account. So we can say, gee, if we make a mistake in our budget, there'll be some place to draw it down from. That's why we have reserves. If we have to use them, it should be a difficult thing to get that money out. This will result in a savings of $300,000. Reduce travel expenses. And keep in mind, these are really difficult to identify because our budgets only go by department, individually. So in order to get a number like travel, the finance department had to actually add every single item from department to department, which is the same thing I had to do in creating the spreadsheet for salaries. But by decreasing by 50% across all departments, we'd get a savings of $25,500. I think when the economic times are what they are today, taking half out of travel isn't a big deal. We've already taken the action under item number 4 to eliminate the public information officer position, but I'd like to go a step beyond that and eliminate the Racine County Economic Development Corporation expense, which is $67,000. Economic development is part of the City Development Department's charter and should not be outsourced. City development should perform these responsibilities, and I've identified some of the ones that should be being taken care of, working to attract new businesses to Racine and working with existing businesses, Racine businesses, to add jobs, identifying and then recommending changes in ordinances to fast-track businesses expanding and coming to Racine. Because between committees, commissions, city hall departments, and council actions, it can actually take much longer to get a business approved than it does to line up its financing. And working with businesses to understand their job skill needs, and working with nonprofit organizations, Racine Unified, Gateway, and UW Parkside, to promote and coordinate current job training programs to meet those needs and make our workforce more attractive to potential employers. Total savings would be $2,103,325. Combined with the savings recommended by my fellow aldermen, this should give our department managers and administration a good start. My constituents expect our department managers and this administration to give us a budget that is balanced by making the tough choices and not just taking the easy way out by raising taxes and taking money out of our reserves. And I hope the people who are watching us and are listening to us understand that tonight is an almost impossible task. To ask 15 alderpeople to go through this budget and try to figure out whether Fredon Accounting needs a computer is really ludicrous. But we should expect that the people we're paying salaries to, in department heads and our administration, they should be finding where that fat is. And they should come to us, and if service cuts are necessary, we should get that presented to us as an alternative. That wasn't presented to us. We see no service cut options. We see nothing but a budget that is going to increase tax bills by 2.7%, and on top of that, take $2,700,000 out of reserves. I have to vote against this budget, and I ask that my fellow council members do the same. Thank you.
Alderman McCarthy. Oh, Alderman Marcus. Second.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. First, this isn't really about one item. In fact, it's not about any of the items. It's about asking our administration to come back to us with a balanced budget. To the item that the alderman from the 8th identified, absolutely, jobs are our #1 priority. Do you know what? There's nobody in City Hall in charge of jobs. We got somebody in charge of finance. We got somebody in charge of housing. We got somebody in charge of public works. But who's in charge of jobs? The problem is, it doesn't seem to be anybody, or it seems to be everybody. And at the end of the day, one of the things I've learned from 30 years in business is when you don't have one person in charge of something, it rarely gets done. The fact is that the City Development Department should be doing exactly what the alderman of the 8th District said. That's their responsibility. and they're not executing on it. I don't think we should reward them for not executing on it by giving them $67,000 to see if they can get somebody from a county economic development group to try to pitch in. We ought to be doing that job. So as to item number 4, hey, first off, it's $67,000. Okay, I think that's pretty important. I think that our city development department should be doing this work. Okay, we're already paying them. Have the assistant director there take on this responsibility, or have someone else there take on this responsibility. But this is not something that we can afford as a city to delegate out or outsource. We have outsourced the job's job. I mean, that's pretty ironic in and of itself. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's up to 15 Alder people to try to find the $1.2 million that's going to the tax levy. We're a bunch of part-time employees, and we don't have the expertise, and we're not down there, as I said, looking at whether Fred in the county needs a computer. The bottom line is, as the alderman of the 15th said, there are people out there who do know that. And we need to have them take this budget back and come back to us with a budget that doesn't require a tax increase, as well as one that doesn't have to pull out of our reserves, because I'm not going to be able to do that very many times. So at the end of the day, our administration failed to do its job. And I'm not going to reward them by giving them a tax increase and letting them take more money out of reserves. So I'll be voting no on this.
Mayor Dickert.
First of all, one of the things that, to answer the question about jobs, yeah, that's my job. And we just had a report yesterday that Racine's unemployment rate is down to 12.8%. When I started, it was at 17.5. I think we're doing pretty well there. The RCEDC side, as Alderman Shakur has pointed out, is invaluable. We've expanded 4 companies in this town. We've held a company to this town for 140 jobs, added another 55 with that same company. I don't even think that's debatable in our dollar-to-dollar payback for what we're doing with that organization. I think it's important, though, that when comments like this are made in passion, I can understand it, because as an administration, we deal with people every day. I deal with people every day who tell me about the fact that they're unemployed and they need help. To somehow suggest that this administration doesn't understand that is inaccurate. To state to the people that are watching this that for some reason we are walking around with this immense amount of fat, and to make the illusion to the people out there that there is all of this work that can be done yet is irresponsible. On top of that, the reality is this is not a dictatorship, it's a democracy. And in a democracy, as the president or the governor or this mayor does, they present a budget to the council. And the council's job is to review the budget, determine if they want to pass it, make adjustments, and send it back. That's the democracy. That's your job. So when you come out with a program in number 1 that says we're going to reduce salaries by 14%, I ask you to remember that we are in the process of negotiating with 15 unions on those very salaries right now. And we've asked them for a 0% increase, and if you remember the law accurately, binding arbitration gives us little control over that issue. So to come out and tell the taxpayers that we can simply just wipe away 14% of the budget of this group that is under 15 unions that are represented is irresponsible. So while I can appreciate the fact that you're commenting to the public about the need and the desire to cut, we understand that. We worked very hard and very long on this. And unfortunately, even coming in with a 0% increase and making cuts on top of that after we got the additions that we were added in our budget, we still continue to look for ways to save money. And as I've told you before, those department heads have been told that as soon as this budget is done, they are to come back to this office and start working on next year to anticipate 5 and 10% cuts in shared revenue. We are already planning for the future. So I think it's important, while I understand passion, we have a responsibility to those people watching this proceeding. And to simply come out and say that these things are going to be done, and this administration doesn't know what they're doing, and those folks can do it because we have no responsibility, is dishonest and irresponsible. Because that means that this council has no right in the process, and that's not accurate. So, if people want to stay and continue going through this budget, trust me, I worked on state budgets for 15 years. This is just the first night. We used to do this for months. I'm happy to stay here as long as you'd like and go through every single line item. And I am happy to do that. And if we could cut, like I said earlier, $1.2 million out of this budget, I'm happy to come in with a 0% increase. But we have the responsibility to those people watching this TV and those people out there to tell them what goes with those cuts. I would love to go out and play politics with this in the last budget that I had. And candidly, it would be very simple. Very simple. It's easy to play politics with budgets. Worked on them for 25 years. Pretty much nothing I couldn't do with this budget to play politics with it. But that's not what they're looking for us, because part of the reason that you're sitting with a 1.7% increase in the debt is because there was some politics played in the past. And I don't think that those people out there, as much as they want us to cut the budget, want us to be irresponsible. So that's what we're here to do. So if you want to stay, because unfortunately, I apologize, but number one, we just can't do by law. If you want to stay, I say let's load up the coffee machines and let's get to it page by page.
Alderman Mack.
Being dishonest, I'd like a chance to respond.
You know, it's alluded to that this administration did not give us a balanced budget. They gave us a balanced budget. By law, they're required to give us a balanced budget. What the alderman in the second doesn't like is the fact that there was a levy increase and that we took from reserves in order to balance the budget. But it's a balanced budget. And to say otherwise is irresponsible. We as a council did not set the parameters for the mayor. We didn't have a meeting, committee of the whole or whatever, and say, Mayor, it's the will of the council to come in with a 0% increase, or 0% tax levy increase. I don't think we could get 15 aldermen to even agree on that, because as we propose cuts tonight, we couldn't get unanimous consent on the cuts that were made. And it goes back to 7-8 years ago when, the motion was to send the budget back to the mayor's office because he made cuts. Now the motion is to let's vote the budget down and send it back to the mayor's office because he didn't make enough cuts. Well, I think the mayor's right. We do have the opportunity to make additional cuts. And I'll start, and I wish Alderman Marcus would have, instead of giving us this essay and reading it word for word, would have actually made some motions to debate some of the proposed cuts that he wanted. But I'll start out. I make a motion that we close the Bryant Center in 2011.
Second. Any discussion on the motion?
Maybe he could hand that out?
I don't have it in writing, I'm sorry. It was one of those things where it was said by several aldermen that we hadn't made enough cuts. We didn't make enough cuts yet tonight, so I'm just starting to throw out some additional items.
Alderman Marcus.
I'm going to speak against the motion.
2 times.
I'm speaking on a new motion.
Continue.
I'm speaking to against this motion because it it goes against all that I'm trying to say tonight. The mayor makes the easy comment that I'm being irresponsible and dishonest. The fact is that's not true, and he knows it. The fact is, what I'm asking for here, and the alderman from the 5th did not understand what I'm getting at, is it's the responsibility of the department managers and the administration to know where these cuts have to be made, not this body.
Point of order.
I'm addressing this motion.
Yeah, we're talking
I
about.
am going to this motion.
Point of order.
I am arguing against this motion.
All right.
I'm arguing against this motion because I don't believe it's our responsibility as a council to be looking for these individual cuts. It's the responsibility of the administration to come to us and at least give us options. Tell us, hey, if you make these service cuts, we can eliminate the tax levy. Not for the alderman of the 5th to come in and say, well, let's close this center or let's do this. The fact is, we don't have the information at our hands to be able to make those reductions. But the administration does. Come back to us and tell us what cuts would have to be made to services, and we can then discuss those with our constituents and make a reasoned decision. We're not going to do that tonight, and we're not going to do that as 15 part-time people.
Alderman was.
He is not speaking to the motion. He is campaigning, please.
Alderman Wisniewski to the question.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in opposition to the motion because